Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Livius Nedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. This episode, we're going to be talking about the book Shakespeare for Squirrels by Christopher Moore. Before we jump into the usual stuff, the bio, the synopsis, all that stuff that you have grown to love over the years, I want to call out, it's a very special day. Today, May 3rd, when we're recording this, is the birthday of Ryan, the former marketing intern. So want to give a big happy birthday to Ryan.
My understanding is that Ryan is sans employment currently, and maybe he might be looking for another unpaid internship.
Oh, you think he's got some time on his hands and you can do some work for us?
I mean, it seems that way.
Well, that's the thing. Like, maybe and I don't want to air his dirty laundry or anything, but like, this is the time where, like a lot of people are having trouble with their employment status because of the pandemic and everything. And he is definitely one of those that's affected by this. He's furloughed, which I believe means just like indefinitely unpaid, but technically still an employee, but eligible for unemployment, right? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think so. I honestly don't know. I think furloughed means like we don't have work for you, but we'll pay your like health benefits.
Oh,
I think
that
that's
makes
the
sense.
difference between furloughed and like laid off.
Right.
Now the question becomes, how eligible are you? I don't know. I don't know. But dude's looking for a job. From my understanding, again, not to air his dirty laundry. So I'm assuming that means that,
I mean, yeah,
either he thinks the job will pay more than unemployment, or there's no unemployment.
Well, there is. He's been posting his process of applying for, because like, here's the other thing. Unemployment is just getting like bombarded with all of these like applications. And so like no state is ready for like the quantity of applicants and stuff. And so that's been a whole scenario where even just getting someone on the phone is like an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I've been picking up little things here and there from him and some other friends going through that process. So yeah, he's eligible. I think he got through. Really, wow. Like, I mean, we just wanted to say happy birthday. Now we're talking about his whole life. But at what age do you not say the birth, like the age, like how old he is?
Oh, I have no idea. As men, I don't know that ever
This
happens.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think for women, it's like 12 or something.
He might. I don't know. Is he older than you? How old are you?
I am 47.
Wow, he just turned 47. So you guys are like the same.
There you go. And here I thought he was such a
guys.
nice kid, but like, yeah, we're the same age. So
Couple of oldies.
at any rate, happy birthday, Ryan. Sorry about all the unemployment talk. I don't know what to say to that. Like, that's weird tangents.
Yeah, it bears mentioning too. I believe May 1st was Axel Tayari's birthday, friend of the podcast. So happy birthday to him
Could be.
too.
Yep.
I don't
tomorrow's
know
May the 4th. Star Wars' birthday or something.
Yeah, I never. All right, yeah. So anyway, here's the bio for Christopher Moore, which is one of my favorite bios. This is pulled from Amazon. Christopher Moore is the author of the novels Secondhand Souls, Sacre Bleu, A Dirty Job, and Lamb. He lives in San Francisco, California. I've seen other bigger ones where it says like he's the author of 16 novels, including blah blah blah. But this was short and sweet. Like it.
See, when I see something like this, I wonder to myself. So, because yeah, he's written. But you're probably right. Probably 16 or something novels, right? But there's 4 mentioned here. Do you think they're like his favorite 4, or like the best-selling 4, or how somebody?
I wonder.
Like
because...
Lamb is probably the one he's best known for, right? I think. So it makes sense the Lamb is in there. But how do you pick those other 3? Because 2 of them are from a series, the same series, and then Sacre Bleu is a standalone. Like, I don't know how you.
Yeah. Well, and then on the back of the book, because we got physical like review copies, it says is the author of 16 previous novels, including Noir, Secondhand Soul, Sacre Bleu, Fool, and Lamb. So like almost the same. I don't know. Like either there's got to be some strategy to it, because those like Dirty Job wasn't listed on the book. And other, but like Noir was the most recent one. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Look, you said there must be a strategy, and after reading, which we'll talk about on our next episode probably, but after reading the afterword from this book, I think Mr. Moore might disagree with you on there being a strategy around a lot of this. So, at any rate, here is the synopsis for Shakespeare for Squirrels. Shakespeare meets Dashiell Hammett in this wildly entertaining murder mystery from New York Times bestselling author Christopher Moore, an uproarious, hard-boiled take on the Bard's most performed play, A Midsummer Night's Dream, featuring Pocket, the hero of Fool and the Serpent of Venice, along with his sidekick Drool and pet monkey Jeff. Set adrift by his pirate crew, Pocket of Dog Snogging, last seen in the Serpent of Venice, washes up on the sun-bleached shores of Greece, where he hopes to dazzle the Duke with his comedic brilliance and become his trusted fool. But the island is in turmoil. Aegeus, the Duke's minister, is furious that his daughter Hermia is determined to marry Demetrius instead of Lysander, the man he has chosen for her. The Duke decrees that if, by the time of the wedding, Hermia still refuses to marry Lysander, she shall be executed or consigned to a nunnery. Pocket, being Pocket, cannot help but point out that this decree is complete bollocks, and that the Duke is an egregious weasel for having even suggested it. Irritated by the fool's impudence, the Duke orders his death. With the Duke's guards in pursuit, Pocket makes a daring escape. He soon stumbles into the wooded realm of the fairy king Oberon, who, as luck would have it, is short a fool. His jester Robin Goodfellow, the mischievous sprite better known as Puck, was found dead, murdered. Oberon makes Pocket an offer he can't refuse. He will make Pocket his fool and have his death sentence lifted if Pocket finds out who killed Robin Goodfellow. But as anyone who is even vaguely aware of the Bard's most performed play ever will know, nearly every character has a motive for wanting the mischievous sprite dead. With too many suspects and too little time, Pocket must work his own kind of magic to find the truth, save his neck, and ensure that all ends well. A rollicking tale of love, magic, madness, and murder, Shakespeare for Squirrels is a Midsummer Night's Noir, a wicked and brilliantly funny good time conjured by the singular imagination of Christopher.
I'm going to insert like applause at the end of this, I think, in when I'm editing this, because like that's a lot, first of all, to read. And if Livius had a slip up here or there, just be glad you didn't hear me read it, because he's like 10 times better at like reading, sight reading or whatever that's called, than I am. And that is rough.
Yeah. So are you familiar with the Midsummer Night's Dream? Let's start there.
Let's start. Yeah. No, not in the least. You know what? And I was thinking about this, like, because this is the third book that includes Pocket, the character, and all of the books have had some sort of Shakespearean element to them, and I have not become any more. I even thought to myself as I was reading that I should find some sort of adaptation of it, of the Midsummer Night's Dream, and watch it or whatever, just to like see like a non-Christopher Moore version. But I have zero experience with it. What about you?
No, none. And that's the embarrassing part, right? Like I was reading it the afterward, and I was like, oh, hey, look, this is completely kind of loosely based on something by Shakespeare.
I'll tell you, though, I have had, there's a whiskey called a Midsummer Night's Dram, which is like a rye whiskey, and I've had that a few times. So, I mean, and I've had a beer called Oberon. So, I mean, I have some experience in this.
That's almost the same thing as being intimately familiar with Shakespeare. I did recognize, and I know we're going to get into the story in a second, but the play that they're putting on, the Rude Mechanicals, right? I did recognize that sounded a lot like Romeo and Juliet. That I did get.
So I will say, before we dive into the book, we started to acknowledge the Shakespeare aspect of it. Even though I'm not familiar with literally any Shakespeare, I will say that I did go to Wikipedia, the place where all knowledge is stored, and I read the plot synopsis for the actual play Midsummer Night's Dream. And this book is basically, with a few embellishments that I'm sure we'll acknowledge, that exact story, with the same characters, same plot points. Like the major plot points are all pretty faithful to the original story. The murder mystery is something that changes aspects of the story. But otherwise, if you're familiar with Midsummer Night's Dream, you already know a lot of the stuff that's happening in the book, and you know a lot of the characters that are in the book.
Let's start off with a character that does not appear in A Midsummer Night's Dream. So this book kicks off shortly after Serpent of Venice. Some time has passed, but Pocket and Drool, who is mentioned in the synopsis, is Pocket's sidekick, and a little dull on the dull side. And Jeff, their monkey, have been ejected, kicked off a pirate ship and left to fend for themselves at sea. And it's been days without any food. Crazy shit is starting to happen to them, right? From hunger and from thirst. But they do end up on land.
Yeah. So basically, they've been at sea long enough where they're out of food, they're out of water. It's choppy water, so they kind of crash and end up on the shore. And that's where we're introduced to one of the first non-Moore characters, Cobweb, who finds them on the shore and saves them, basically, I guess.
Well enough that they can travel, farther into Greece, where they discover the mechanicals. Which I think, right? So did you look up a definition for mechanicals? Or were you able to? I think that just means workers, right?
I think I took it as a general term for the people who do like trade labor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they have been tasked with putting on a play for the wedding that's coming up. The problem is none of them, they're trade laborers essentially, like Rob said, and they don't have any theater experience. But our hero Pocket at least thinks he does, so he volunteers to help them get the play going in the right direction.
Yeah, and honestly, like a lot of this setup happens in the very first few chapters. So like, as the mechanicals agree to have him help them prepare for the play that they're putting on, they run into basically a couple of like goons, like government goons, named Blacktooth and Burke. So they come across this meeting and start questioning him about what are, basically like the modern equivalent would be like asking for ID and stuff like that. And a little skirmish goes down. And this is the part that I'm a little bit weird about. And I want to get Livius's opinion on, because as this little kerfluffle happens, Drool gets captured by a bunch of guards, and one of the bad guys, the adversaries or whatever, takes a swing with a sword at Pocket, misses, but then they think that he disappeared, and they can't see where he went. And so I want to talk this through. And usually, like, I don't expose my lack of knowledge of what happened in a story, like, as we're talking, but like, this part confused me. Mm-hmm. What's your take on what went down?
Sure. So I'm pretty sure I have a solid grasp on what went down. So what we saw was that he disappears, but then Pocket immediately after that meets Puck, who's Robin Goodfellow, who is an elf with magical powers, who convinces Pocket that Pocket is dead. What happened was, and I'm in the 90th percentile sure on this, is that Puck made Pocket disappear, saving him from probably death. From the palace guards that accost them while they're practicing their play. But as a joke, he tells Pocket he's dead, and Pocket believes it. So he was made invisible by Puck.
Gotcha.
In that scene. I think that's what your question was. Something around what happened there. Yep.
It was a little confusing because and I guess that would make sense because, and this isn't spoiling anything, but Puck has some actual like magical qualities. And so like that is something that he could accomplish, but also the fact that Jones, the puppet on the stick that Pocket carries everywhere, was talking without the support of Pocket, threw me off too, because like that's not something that's ever happened before. So, but it's absolutely something Puck with his magical powers could make happen, which is really trickstery.
It is, and I mean, like you said, it's not a spoiler, and I agree, because every time the name Puck comes up, it's basically that asshole, and he has magic. Like that's literally every time he's brought up. Like those are the two things that are said about him. Nothing else. It's literally always like that guy's a jerk because he did these things, and the motherfucker has magic. So, Um, yeah, so Puck sends Pocket on his way. Pocket, thinking he is dead, is going to move on through the forest. Where, and again, I don't know how far we gonna go into the story, but he does re-encounter Cobweb, who is a fairy, and ultimately a group of her friends. And again, the whole thing becomes this. I guess because it says there's a murder mystery, I guess I'll take one further step than that. Pretty early into the book, Pocket finds Puck. And Puck has been killed by a crossbow. So one of the things, and we can talk about the story in like kind of very general terms, but really at the heart of this, one of the things that needs to be resolved is who killed Puck. But through the course of the rest of the story, which again, I kind of lauded Christopher Moore for this kind of like, this is kind of interesting. I don't know how many like straight up like detective mysteries he's written. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now that I know that some of it's Midsummer Night's Dream, I don't know how much credit goes to him versus, to the source material. But basically everybody else is involved, and like everybody has an angle either around the death of Puck or this upcoming wedding. And in true fashion to kind of modern mystery tales, there are a lot of tasks put on Pocket. So it's kind of like he's like, well, I really need to know this. And they're like, all right, well, I can help you with that. But what I'll need you to do for me is this. And that type of kind of quid pro quo through the course of a mystery kind of extends throughout the whole book.
And the real leverage is that, as I mentioned earlier, Drool is held captive by the Duke and his bride-to-be. And so his whole motivation is, I got to free his original motivation, I'll say, because like as the story goes on, things evolve. But his original motivation is, I have to get Drool out of prison. And if I do, task A for Theseus and task B for Hippolyta, I'm going to just say that's how you say it. Those are the things I have to do in order to free my friend, or at least while I'm doing those tasks, I can find a way to do my own thing and spring him or whatever. So his motivation is, they got my boy locked up and I can't leave without him. I have to go and free him. And so that's the driving force for him to agree to do all these things that these people want him to do. I will say that the manufactured part of the story that is not part of the original Shakespearean play is the whole murder mystery. So if you're not familiar, in the actual Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck doesn't die. He's kind of a character throughout the the entire story. So his death and the mystery and finding out who did it is the twist that changes the way that the story goes down from what it was in the original Shakespearean stuff.
So through the course of this, Rob, I'm not sure why Rob did this, but he has notes for like 24 characters, I think. And that's he's probably missing some. That's all I'm going to say. This is a lot of characters in this book and a lot of balls to keep in the air for Christopher Moore and for us as readers to kind of follow along. So there are a slew of fairies that we're introduced to. Again, as mentioned in the synopsis, Oberon, who's the Night King, and his group of goblins. Then there's kind of like the royalty aspect of it, right? So the rich people, then there's like the poor people, and the middle of it all is Pocket. All I'll say is that I'm glad he killed Puck because, and he says this in the afterword, but there's only room for one fool in this, and Pocket to me seems like it'd be the fool I want to follow on a story.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to acknowledge something that Lee and Livius kind of casually were talking about off podcast. It's a lot to keep track of when you're reading, and this is actually something that in the afterword, I believe, more acknowledged, was that having similar characters have the same first letter in their name is very confusing. And so Hermia and Helena are two characters of the same kind of plot line in the story. And so I didn't even bother trying to like separate the two in my mind. I just knew, oh, it's one of those girls in that particular plot line. So there is a lot of stuff to keep track of. But one of the saving graces is that Moore effortlessly always makes the story entertaining. So I felt comfortable knowing that as long as I could keep track of what was going on with Pocket and Drool and Cobweb and kind of the main thread of characters, everything else would be. I knew that I would know enough to still have the story mean something, and that extends even further into. I was confident that not being familiar with Midsummer Night's Dream wouldn't take away from my enjoyment of the story.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was a thing. So yes, I agree. I agree with you on that. Yeah, I think, and always for me, the strength in Moore's writing is his characters, and Pocket, now in his third appearance, is always super enjoyable because he's goddamn funny. And Moore always manages to kind of introduce these other characters. So we were talking about, let me find it in the list of characters, but the two palace guards, even the interaction between them, one of them is just a moron who uses the wrong word for things. So like a similar sounding word, but the wrong word when I was correcting him. Yeah. Even these little side characters were super entertaining. I want to give a special kudos for the introduction of Cobweb. So without spoiling anything in the story, all I can say is I hope that we find a way to see her again, because she is definitely my favorite new character of Moore's is Cobweb.
Fully agree. I want to make a point to say that I actually with the character list that I made for our notes, I did a cheat. There was a character list in the Wikipedia entry for Midsummer Night's Dream, so I copy pasted that, and then I just added in the characters that he had from other. So he borrowed some characters he borrowed Rumor, who is this narrator character who just shows up to basically literally just dump exposition or refocus the narrative in a very self-aware, not self-aware, but fourth wall kind of way, where we're aware that that's what's going on. Is from Henry IV. And Blacktooth and Burke, which are the characters that Livius was just talking about, are borrowed from or inspired by characters in Much Ado About Nothing. So I didn't comb through the book like I usually do and find a name and write down what they do. I just stole it all from Wikipedia this time.
The other character I wanted to mention was Rumor, Painted in Tongues, and I know these borrowed from another story, but I will say that again. It's a great introduction to a character and the purpose that he serves. There is every scene in the book that Rumor is in, I think is great. So yes, perhaps this is a retelling with added bits from, a famous play. But the things that Moore does to personalize it are, look, I don't know that I could read Midsummer Night's Dream. I don't even know if you can read it. I mean, it's a play, right? I mean, I know you can, but I'm sure there's probably a novelization of it. All I can say is that I can't imagine I'd find it nearly as enjoyable as I did being taken through the book by Pocket and with the other items that Moore introduces into the story.
Fully agree. That's actually good. That will definitely come up in my my wrap up for the book. One thing I want to acknowledge is that this book is called Shakespeare for Squirrels, and there's something that we have not mentioned yet. And that's squirrels. And all I'm going to say is that there are squirrels in the book. And it's something that he didn't need to do, the way that he incorporated squirrels into the book. But it is so fucking fundamentally Christopher Moore, the way that he did use them. And it is absolutely something that I'm very thankful he chose to use, because it just added a fun element to the book that was entertaining. And it made for some some really funny one-off moments and stuff. So his incorporation of squirrels into the book was great, but we can't spoil how he did that.
So I was afraid you were going. I didn't know. I was like, when do I stop him? Because I don't think he should be talking about this. But I think you did a very good job rolling that out.
You had the hooked stick with the hook on the end. You're going to pull me off the stage.
Yes, correct. I'm surprised one of those didn't show up in this book. So, yeah, I don't know how much else we can say. It's a Christopher Moore book. They're always entertaining. There are a number of authors that I read that I don't care about the story at all, and Moore is one of them, because I know his characters are gonna deliver, and that's, you know what I mean. That's kind of where I'm at with this book. Like, it didn't matter if this was based on A Midsummer Night's Dream or on whatever, Rent. Like, if Moore's writing it, it's going to be kind of tongue in cheek, funny, and a book that make, like, you kind of smile more often than not while reading it.
Yes, I agree with that. My only other thought, going back to the fact that this is based off of Midsummer Night's Dream, is, yeah, I mean, it does follow the story pretty faithfully with, like, some necessary adjustments based on like the way he chose to change the plot. But yeah, if you know how that story plays out, he's pretty faithful to, like, the main beats, but he definitely puts his own stank on it pretty heavily throughout. So I don't know. You want anything else, or do you want to just you want to do some wrap ups?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
All right. It's Christopher Moore. I've read every book that he's written. I really I love when a new Christopher Moore book comes out. So that's my personal bias. I was excited about it, and I knew that he was going to deliver, and obviously he did. I'm very happy with the opportunity to read more of his stuff whenever it comes out. That being said, important things I want the listener to know is that you don't have to have a working knowledge of the Shakespearean side of things in order to appreciate the book. Part of me wanted to go through and get an idea of that before I read it, decided not to, and the book is just as entertaining and interesting without having that knowledge. And that's what, like, so I have a note when it comes to language. One of the reasons that I don't approach, like, trying to become more familiar with Shakespearean stuff is the little bit that I've sampled in my life has been so fucking difficult to understand that it makes it makes it really not worth it, kind of, in a way, which sounds kind of lazy or whatever, but I'm probably in the majority in thinking that. That being said, having someone like Moore who took the time to understand the original stuff, understand what it means, and find a way to retell it in his own way, and adding his own unique spin and humor and style to it, is actually probably, like, beneficial to people in a big way, because now I have an understanding of that story in a way that makes sense to me. And if I wanted to, I could explore that further, or I could just say, all right, I get the idea of that story, and that's good enough for me. So the fact that we have people out there that are willing to kind of make that effort brings to us things from the past that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. So definitely big points to Christopher Moore for taking that approach. Like Olivia said earlier, one of his big strengths is the characters that he writes. And my thought about this specific book, with, what is it, like 20, 25 characters that I listed, and there are more beyond that, is that he's the type of person that he writes a character to be uniquely that character. You read these books from time to time with, I guess I could say, less skilled authors, where every character feels like a different shade of the same color. Like, someone's snarky and uses, intelligent language, and then everybody else in the book is somewhat snarky and somewhat uses intelligent language. He has a way of making characters their own selves, which it's one of those things where it's one of those things where when it works good, you don't notice it. But for me, that character aspect of his books is always one of the things that makes it the most readable. So those are kind of the two big things that I wanted to say about what I think are strengths of the book. Overall, it's just really solid, well written. It carries all the classic Christopher Moore characteristics, his style, his humor, and I really enjoyed it. And this gets my highest rating so far this year at 9 out of 10.
I want to tack on a little bit to what Rob said before I get into my review. Yes, on reading like old English plays. God, that sounds terrible. The language would be terrible. That being said, not only do I know for a fact that you don't have to be familiar with the Midsummer Night's Dream, you don't have to really pick up the previous two books if you don't want to. I think that this book does enough of a job giving the main character a foundation within the book that you probably don't need to know his backstory at this point. So don't worry about necessarily having to go back right now and pick up Fool. That being said, if you read this, you'll probably want to go back and read Fool and The Serpent of Venice, I would imagine, because this is very enjoyable. So Pocket's third outing. Although I really enjoyed the previous two books, I think this one, for some reason, might have endeared me to Pocket even more than the other ones did. So, like, I enjoyed those, but now I feel like I'm a Pocket fan after this one for some reason, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Moore's books are often, satire. They're, like, silly at times, like unbelievably silly at times. But the delivery is so good that, like I said, you can't help but read this with a smile on your face, and that's that holds true from all the way back from Lamb, the first book that I read by Christopher Moore, and I guess that's where I was going with this. Other than Biff, I think that Pocket is my new favorite Christopher Moore character. So really enjoying his adventures. Yeah, there's a little bit of a mystery. There's a ton of magic. There's a ridiculous number of like relationship interactions between people to keep track of. And even if you don't follow it all the way through, it almost doesn't matter because the characters are so entertaining that any interaction in this book between two characters is enough to carry you just on that strength without a ton of concern about the intricate and complicated at times story that's going on behind it. We did just change, oddly enough, on our scoring system. We talked about in the last episode. We changed audience to conclusion, so how the story wraps up versus how wide an audience is. We did it probably 1 week too soon because this probably would have been my highest rated audience of the year. So last week we reviewed Satire, right? It was Bentley Little, The Bank, which was a great story, but gross and terrifying in parts. And then we read what I would call another satire this week, which is lighthearted and funny and heartfelt. So two satirists back to back. Similar great results, but doing it very, very different ways. I'll probably read everything Christopher Moore writes for as long as he continues writing. So no surprise. Also, I believe my highest rating of the year. I also came in at 9 based on those 8 categories or whatever that we rank it on. 9 for this one. 10.
All right. I'm going to get the calculator. I got to get the calculator app on my phone. 9 plus 9 divided by 2. That's 9. That's an overall score of 9.
Yep. That is correct.
For the book, which is this definitely handily beats all of the other books that we've reviewed this year. But I mean, we've been given some pretty good scores out. So we've been reading good books. Chris Moore just knows how to do it. One thing that we didn't talk about this time that we typically talk about with Christopher Moore books is character crossover. And so I noticed something. So like it seems like as time is going on, back in the day, Moore used to have character from one book show up in another book pretty frequently. That's not really happening the same way lately. And I was kind of confused about it, but I went over to his website recently, and the way his website lists his books is by almost like series. So, The Dirty Job and Secondhand Souls books are the Death Merchant Chronicles, and Serpent of Venice, Fool, Shakespeare for Squirrels are the Chronicles of Pocket the Fool. And so it seems like as he continues to make books, it's less like there's these variety of books where a character can cross over, and more like he's creating, maybe not necessarily intentionally, but like a series. So I just find that interesting because one of my favorite things about him had always been a character from, one book showing up in another, like the angel from Lamb being in The Stupidest Angel, that kind of thing. And it's not happening as much, but at least that's kind of like an explanation why. It seems like he's, but also I think timing, like stuff that takes place in like, Shakespearean times
That's what I was
versus
thinking.
modern times can't cross over. So like, the date of books has a part to play in that, but just something that I thought I'd point out. So these particular books, because they take place so far in the past, don't benefit from being able to cross over as much.
There you go. Biff could have been in this one somehow.
Biff could have been in it, so maybe some of the Sacre Blue characters could have too. I don't know.
It's a good point. Good point. We are scheduled to have an interview with Christopher Moore, which is super, super cool. There was a little bit of a I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, a roadblock with scheduling that we're working through. So hopefully the next episode you hear from an audio standpoint will be an interview with Christopher Moore. I'm very, very excited to talk to him and pick his brain a little bit about some of these things. I'm sure Rob will have plenty of crossover questions for him.
Yeah. In preparation, I've started watching YouTube videos of him at like book signings and stuff, asking and doing Q&As. Partially because I hate to be the guy that asks the question that gets asked all the time, but also just to kind of like give me ideas of things to talk about. And he's always entertaining the way his books are, but that guy is like intimidatingly smart. And so I'm a little bit like, when you get a smart person, I feel like I have to step up my game just so I don't sound like a dumbass when I'm asking questions. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm a little bit nervous about it.
See, and I've watched zero Christopher Moore on YouTube. Not intimidated at all.
I'll just let you ask all the questions.
There you go.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
All right, so let's check in. One more week of quarantine. What did you watch this week?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the not as good one, and then there's two things. So the first is I watched the second episode of the new Penny Dreadful. Not liking it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like, so the problem is, all right, so here's the thing. I think it's a very I was trying to put a finger on like what is just not resonating with me, and I'm trying to say this in the best way possible. So like when you think about the original Penny Dreadful series, it's Dracula, it's Frankenstein, it's all that kind of stuff. It's all like the white boy fantasy stuff you grew up with, right? And with this new series, they're going for a real authentic Mexican experience that I have no knowledge of. So I feel like it's just taking longer to appreciate what's going on or why it's going on. And there's just a lot of racial tension involved that I'm never a big fan of the racial tension plot kind of thing. So it hasn't endeared itself to me yet.
So that's interesting. So let me ask a question. Do you feel, because I haven't seen any of it, so do you think that someone that perhaps grew up in a traditional like Mexican household has a different feel like this, like maybe you did about there being, whatever, vampires and Frankenstein in the first one?
That's what I'm curious about, because culturally I have no knowledge of like Mexican folklore or religion or anything like that. So if there is something that you can identify with that like makes it easier to get into the story, I don't have that, and I feel like it's, at least I feel like that's causing barriers to my getting into the story. But I'm thinking maybe that's a thing.
That's really interesting, because from a storytelling standpoint, and again, I'm doing this from somebody who's only ever, taken in stories and not created them. Like, one of the cool things about, especially supernatural type shows, is the discovery process, right? Mm-hmm. So it's fun to discover things. But I guess if you're writing from some type of source material and you assume that a good portion of your audience understands that source material, then maybe your discovery, what you're putting out for people to discover, isn't as good, and then it loses the people who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, and it's weird because like I'm not, I'm trying to think of another approach. Like if there was some sort of like Russian Yeti story that, would that be as foreign to me? I don't know. Like I don't know what, there's some sort of like block going on where I'm just not loving the culture. And it might just be that there's not enough of the supernatural stuff and it's more of the everyday people strife. I don't know. That could be it too.
Yeah. I was just thinking, because, you said Yeti, and the first thing that came to mind was the Ancestor, the Daniel Trussoni book that we read.
Yeah.
And like, we were cool with discovering that. I was cool with, I guess I won't speak for you, but I thought that like part of the fun of that book was kind of finding out about the folklore and like getting to discover what this creature is that had been hinted at. But I'm guessing she did that in a way then that was interesting, because I had no idea what, you know what I mean? Like what that region has for folklore or whatever. So anyway, well, I'm sorry to hear that, because I know you're very much looking forward to that show.
Yeah. And then honestly, like that was one of the big selling points, was like, great, we're not retreading the same shit over and over again. This is something new that I could get excited about that I didn't know about before. And that's why I was originally enthusiastic about the series, but something's keeping me out of it. So I don't know if it's that, or if it's like I said before, there's not a lot of supernatural stuff going on. But I'm going to persist.
And I guess when a show is supposed to be supernatural. Now, I'm glad. I'm going to jump topics a little bit. I'm glad that Josh Mallerman was really enjoying Outlander, because Outlander was like, is a good show about time travel that fucking just ignores the fact that time travel is a central tenet of the show. You know what I mean? Yeah. So in some ways, like if you're tuning in for a time travel show and you watch Outlander, you'll be disappointed at the lack of like working in the time travel sphere. So I guess, when you turn on a show and you expect to be a lot of supernatural shit, and instead you get, like you said, kind of whatever racial everyday strife, that can be a little bit off-putting. Yeah. What was the other thing you watched?
The other thing that I watched that I really enjoyed was the Beastie Boys documentary that came out from the Apple TV Plus service. Did you hear about this?
No, I did not. I'm not surprised though that you say you enjoyed it. That doesn't surprise me at all. I didn't know this was a thing.
So, how familiar are you with Beastie Boys?
I mean, I could probably belt out a couple lines, but not like intimately familiar with like their career origins or anything.
Okay. So most people will know that one of the three Beastie Boys died. I think it was like 2012 or something like that. Oh. So of the three, so I'm going to try to remember the names. So it was Mike D. MCA. Right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, Adam Yauch was the name of the guy who was the one that died, and he was the guy who originally kind of brought the band together. The two remaining members, partnered up with Spike Jonze to do kind of a live documentary. So what they did was they put together all of like the traditional like documentary footage, old photos, old videos, interviews, all that kind of stuff like a documentary would be. But they did a series of like live shows where they live narrated the documentary in front of an audience. So it's kind of a unique approach to a documentary, because it was like a documentary show as opposed to just like a finished film. It was interesting to watch like the progress of the band and all that stuff. It got really emotional when they started talking about, what happened when he died and all that stuff. But one of the things that I thought was interesting that I didn't know was that, and this doesn't mean much because I'm not a fan of this other band, but the original Beastie Boys, before they got big, had a girl in the band, and another person in their orbit was a different. So there was two girls that one was in the band, one was part of their friend group, and they would later go on to be in the band Luscious Jackson.
That silence is, I have no idea who Luscious Jackson is.
Yeah. So that was just a weird, but they did a cool thing at the beginning of the documentary where they acknowledged once they got big, they were pushed to be just a group of boys and they had to kick out the girl, and they did. But they're like, that was in the documentary on the stage. They said that was a really shitty thing to do, and we feel really bad that we did that. So usually, like, you hear like the person got kicked out, and it's just like no one really talks about it, but they just put it right out in front, right at the beginning, saying, "Hey, we kicked her out, and that was a really shitty thing to do."
I agree that's cool of them. My other thought is like, I guess you get to a point where you're so successful that you can look back on it and say like it was a shitty thing to do, because when they were just trying to make it, they were probably like, oh yeah, fuck this, like we don't want to work like shitty 9-to-5 jobs, like yeah, we got the girls got to go, yeah, we can do that.
Oh, totally, yeah.
But then afterwards, when you're successful and can live off of, you know, the royalties of you've got to fight for your right to party, you could probably then afford to look inside yourself and say, well, that was a terrible thing we did. Not to slight them. I've never disliked the Beastie Boys. I've just never been a big fan. You know what I mean? Like it's cool that I'm glad you enjoyed the documentary.
Yeah, it's very good. I liked it.
Here we go. Watch something in its entirety this week. No, not here we go. This is very, very mainstream. Have you heard of Upload on Amazon Prime?
Jesus, no, I don't think I have at all.
So this came out on Friday, so you didn't have much time to hear about it. It's Robbie Amell. Do you know who he is, the actor? He's probably best known for being Stephen Amell's brother. Stephen Amell played Arrow on the CW for a few years there. Yeah. So it is a weird show. So it takes place in the, you know, we'll say near future, a few years from now, where before your death, you have the option to buy a service where they upload you to a basically like a heaven that is a computer generated like hotel, like resort, perhaps that you live in. But then you can continue to communicate like through video calls or through like virtual reality, like your family can visit you and you have all your senses about you and your consciousness, you know, so it's like continuing to live, only you live in a different place. And it's about this guy who's a young guy, software developer, who winds up having a sketchy incident that causes him to wind up in the hospital, and he is uploaded to one particular company that does this thing. So it's kind of like it turns into an investigation as to like the circumstances surrounding his death, but it's also about his, you know, kind of goofy relationship with his live girlfriend, plus the relationship he develops with the like customer service rep that has to look after him. 8 or 10 episodes. They're like 40 minutes each, but it was fun. I actually really enjoyed it. It was cute. It reminded Shakespeare for Squirrels, right? Like a lot of like grinning through the episodes. One word of warning, and you may consider this a spoiler or not. It does not have a clean ending. There's definitely a cliffhanger ending there for another season. So do not expect anything to be resolved, I guess, towards the end of it, which annoys me. You know what I mean? I always feel like any TV series should have like even if it's a bigger overarching story, there should be a tiny resolution at the end. I feel the same way about book series. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
I remember when we reviewed 50 Shades of Grey, that even though the book sucked, I was like, oh, that really was just, I don't know. There wasn't like a resolution and then, you know, continuation of the story. It was just like a hard cut. Like there could have just been another chapter after it, and it just could have kept going. So that's kind of how this is, but really enjoyable, kind of fun and funny.
Nice. That's when you were talking about that, I had this moment where I was like, wait, did I watch this? And I didn't. But what I was thinking of was there's like a Black Mirror episode that does something vaguely kind of like that with people, and there's like a kind of an imaginary world when they're in like old folks' homes or something, and they go out and they do stuff, and it reminded me of that, and I was like, oh shit, I think I watched this, but I absolutely did not.
I don't know if like, do you know Ray Kurzweil is?
I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah, so that's his belief. So he is most famously known for being an inventor.
Wait, yeah, I was watching a video where someone was he does a lot of predicting the future and stuff.
Yeah, like predicting technology future,
right.
Like not I don't want listeners to think like I know you know who I'm talking about by saying that, but I don't want you to think like he predicts like lottery numbers or like disasters or like which Kardashian is gonna whatever get their own show next or anything like that. Yeah, well, that's his goal. His goal in life, he actually believes, is that he wants to live long enough that he believes that probably like I think it's the 2030s that he'll be able to upload his consciousness to a computer. Probably not like this goofy little movie or that Black Mirror episode, but something where he will be able to be uploaded and exist forever inside a computer, basically.
It's so weird that you brought that up because so there's this YouTube channel that I've been watching lately called Answers with Joe, and it's just this dude who takes like these concepts, like usually scientific concepts, and breaks them down, like interesting things to talk about, and breaks them down in a way that is pretty understandable for anybody who would watch it. And today I was watching one of his videos is all about the forecasts that for basically like from 2020 through like 2050 that you're talking about. And he lays out all of the different like kind of technological things that he think is going to happen in that time. So it's crazy that you bring that dude up because I literally watched a video about his predictions probably 45 minutes before we started recording.
Oh, wow. Here's what I'll say about Ray Kurzweil. I watched one documentary on him probably 5, maybe even 10 years ago, right? But I mean, it really stuck with me. So another thing that he's known for is he takes, and now I'm just making up numbers, but I want you to understand that whatever you eat on a day where you're a glutton, okay, like on your worst fucking day, that dude takes in vitamins.
Oh, he's a big supplement guy?
Yeah. Well, he managed to cure, and I wish I wasn't really prepared to talk about him. He cured a disease that he had that's uncurable, and he did it all through vitamins. Like, this guy is prepared to like hack his body to live as long as is necessary to get his end goal. And really the purpose of me saying that is like, I'm some level of bummed whenever a celebrity dies or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's unfortunate. I kind of like that guy or whatever. Like Ray Kurzweil is one guy I'm actually like rooting for to stay alive. And it's not that I have some, like I follow him online or I'm on his Twitter or any, I don't. I watched one documentary on him, but it stuck with me so much that I think the day that I find out that guy died, I will genuinely be sadder than, when a musician or actor or author, you know what I mean? Like he's one guy I'm pulling for because he has like a goal. Like there's a reason he wants to stay alive. And it's not just like continue taking breaths. Like he has planned his whole life out for this one end result where he can get into a computer before he drops dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things in this video that like blew my mind is like, he's got like a dozen honorary doctorates from different like, university. Like the dude is just like super bona fide, but yeah, like his whole idea is like you said, uploading consciousness. And then like the idea that as AI evolves, the concept of like an organic human will become less and less common, and like less, I guess, advantageous or whatever. So yeah, like transhumanism, like becoming part machine, part human, and then like obviously to the point where your consciousness is basically entirely computerized, right? Kind of is a thing.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm rooting for the guy who's trying to put us in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Well,
in his version, though,
rethink this.
Like that version, we are the machines, though, kind of. So like we're not batteries. We're the ones that won.
Yeah, that's true. We can all be the one.
Yeah, we're all Neos out there flexing and shit.
Yeah, no kidding. And then as the first thing that came to mind was Christopher Lambert, and there can be only one. Highlander. Never mind. We're going down a deep dark hole.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening. Like I said, we should have Christopher Moore up as our next episode. If not, there's going to be a book live happening probably on Facebook. Probably less than a week from when you're hearing this. So follow us on Facebook, join the Book Podcast listening group, so we can keep you posted on stuff like that.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. That'll wrap it up for this episode. Until next time, I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livia Snedden. Keep reading. Fuck stockings.